47. Slow from Chicago to Irving, heavy from Lawrence to the extension. Inbound Ike, stop and go from Manheim into the Circle. Thorndale to the post office, an hour and 2 up on 50. Heavy from Pulaski to before Harlem. Inbound Stevenson, brake lights from Harlem to the Dan Ryan due to a crash now off to the left shoulder. 55 to Lakeshore Drive, an hour from the Tri-State 51. Outbound 235 from Lakeshore Drive, 43 slow from Western to Cicero. Inbound Dan Ryan, pockets of delays from 95th into the Circle. 95th to downtown 21, outbound 15. That's traffic. I'm Eddie Manzano. On AM 560, The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. Your official Chicagoland weather forecast. From the 1 Hour Heating and Air Conditioning Weather Center, our meteorologist, Steve Williams.
Mostly cloudy, some drizzle by this afternoon. The high today at 50. Cloudy with a shower this evening, followed by some rain late tonight, low 37. A shower early tomorrow morning. It'll be a chilly day. Clouds will give way to some sun, the high 45. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
42 at O'Hare. Next news, 7:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Make sure to check out the Income Store live video stream of today's show right now at 560theanswer.com.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is dead. He was the founder and leader of ISIS, the most ruthless and violent terror organization anywhere in the world. The United States has been searching for Baghdadi for many years. Capturing or killing Baghdadi has been the top national security priority of my administration. U.S. Special Operations Forces executed a dangerous and daring nighttime raid in northwestern Syria and accomplished their mission in grand style. He was a sick and depraved man, and now he's gone. Last night was a great night for the United States and for the world. A brutal killer, one who has caused so much hardship and death, has violently been eliminated. He will never again harm another innocent man, woman, or child. He died like a dog. He died like a coward. The world is now a much safer place.
Of course, that's President Trump over the weekend announcing the raid that took out al-Baghdadi, the terrorist-in-chief of ISIS. Also, reports that a spokesman for ISIS was also killed over the weekend in a CIA-derived operation. Robert O'Brien, National Security Advisor for President Trump, was on Meet the Press with Chuck Todd, who he graciously endured. He had this to say about the importance of getting al-Baghdadi.
Look, I think today's a great day for the United States of America and a great day for the world. This was the number one wanted person in the world. He's a brutal, vicious terrorist. Killed many people. The president went into detail. We can talk some more about that. But it's also important for the world to know that the United States has a long reach, and the men and women of our armed services executed this mission flawlessly, took him down, and his colleagues that are still alive should be worried.
And one of the notes of caution from those less inclined to be supportive of the Trump administration, the clap on, clap off Jim Clappers of the world, the Mike Morrell, former Obama deputy CIA chief, and Democrat members of Congress who weren't informed about the raid until after the fact. Judicious decision, in my estimation, by President Trump. But this doesn't mean that the fight against radical Islamic terrorism generally is over, or with ISIS specifically. And we know, says Robert O'Brien.
Look, we're looking for ISIS wherever it might reemerge. This was a huge win for the president. The president came into office. He was given a plate of foreign policy challenges that were probably more difficult for any president coming into office than any president since Truman, who took office during the Second World War. And he's defeated, with respect to ISIS, he defeated the physical caliphate, which was the size of Great Britain. We've now taken out the leader of the caliphate. I mean, I can tell you it was great news last night at 7:15 local time. We were in the Situation Room, and the commander of the mission called and said, 100% confidence jackpot.
Mike
And President Trump wasn't wearing a members-only jacket. Remember that? When Obama looked like so small and diminutive sitting there, and there were men around him wearing suits and generals wearing, their uniforms. It was just strange. It was a different look.
Vice President Pence was on Face the Nation, also Fox News Sunday, but this is a clip from Face the Nation, speaking not just as the Vice President of the United States, but also as the father of a Marine.
As the father of a United States Marine, I couldn't be more grateful that we have a commander-in-chief that is always asking about whether or not American forces have to be in harm's way.
So
and if they're not on the mission, they weren't on the mission. ISIS, the caliphate, had been destroyed. So the president said, we'll bring them home. But last night, the president of the United States proved to the world that our fight against ISIS is unrelenting. And by killing the leader of ISIS, the active operational leader of ISIS, who it was reported just 2 weeks ago was giving orders to ISIS fighters in Syria. We believe we'll have a measurable impact on the effectiveness of that terrorist organization, but we're not going to let up. We're not going to stop the fight. And at the same time, we're going to continue to work with our allies to establish that safe zone between Kurdish Syria and Turkey that the president had myself and Secretary of State Pompeo negotiate in Ankara just a week ago.
For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, the Vice President of the Catherine Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation, also the author of books including Wiki at War and Private Sector Public Wars. Jim, thanks for joining us.
Hey, great to be with you.
How important was taking out al-Baghdadi?
Well, I do think the vice president had an interesting point. Bin Laden was kind of semi-retired when the strike that took him out in Pakistan. Baghdadi had remained the operational leader of ISIS, and Al Qaeda was a less structured organization than ISIS was. And when you take out leadership in a functional structure, it does have a more degrading effect. So I would say on balance, it was operationally fairly significant, probably more important even psychologically, because remember, ISIS did the one thing that al-Qaeda never dared to do. They declared the establishment of the caliphate. This, in a sense, was a historical mission. The notion that the historical caliphate had returned, and Baghdadi had called himself a caliph, which was incredibly significant. And in a part of the world where honor is really power, to essentially lose your caliphate after declaring that the historical end of times had arrived, and then have the caliph die, in an embarrassingly weak way at the hands of the enemy, that's a psychological blow that I think is pretty powerful as well.
Do you think President Trump was too braggadocious or even too graphic or revealed too many details during that Sunday morning announcement?
I don't know what metric we have to measure that against. I mean, you often hear this thing, well, you kill these people and it just incites them and they take revenge. Actually, the empirical literature doesn't really provide evidence to suggest that. A weakened group has less capability. That's just the reality. And when you take out their leaders and you give them devastating blows, they actually tend to get weaker. They tend not to kind of rebound like Rocky in round 8.
So nice reference.
Yes, very good.
Graham Wood over at The Atlantic had an interesting piece on this. Now, of course, he wrote this piece 4 years ago, What ISIS Really Wants, that was really a fascinating, in-depth piece. He terms Baghdadi's demise as his final humiliation. He makes the point that where Baghdadi was found is interesting because it's deep in what is considered enemy territory for ISIS. The dominant force in the northwestern Syrian town in which he was located is not ISIS, but HTS, which is an affiliate of al-Qaeda, and sort of suggests that, after, as you were kind of walking down that road, after having between 440 to 100,000 square miles of territory that they reigned over, to what had happened to the caliphate, to then, of course, where he's found that he was marginalized at the point in which our troops encountered him over the weekend.
Well, I think that's a fair statement. I mean, clearly he was on the run. Whether he was based out of there or transiting through there, I I don't know. You can't really tell from the reports, but clearly that was not. We heard these kind of comments over the weekend that because we took a couple hundred forces out of northwest Syria, that the caliphate was going to spring back to life. No evidence for that, and clearly this doesn't suggest that was the case.
But we still have some troops protecting this oil field, and I just wanted you to hear President Trump yesterday when asked that question.
But we are leaving soldiers to secure the oil. Now, we may have to fight for the oil. That's okay. Maybe somebody else wants the oil, in which case they have a hell of a fight. But there's massive amounts of oil, and we're securing it for a couple of reasons. Number one, it stops ISIS, because ISIS got tremendous wealth from that oil. We have taken it. It's secured. Number two, and again, somebody else may claim it, but either we'll negotiate a deal with whoever's claiming it if we think it's fair, or we will militarily stop them very quickly.
And he went on to say that we should be able to take some also, and what I intend to do perhaps is make a deal with ExxonMobil or one of our great companies to go in there and do it properly. Is that, what is he
I'm not
doing?
sure anybody's going to want to move into the middle of a war zone
right.
and start doing. But I think the president hit on a key point, which is the oil is definitely a center of gravity. It was ISIS made tremendous amount of money selling oil on the black market. Assad would love to get a hold of those fields. It would be great to fill his coffers with money. So this is like controlling the spice. He who controls the spice controls the universe. So he who controls the access to that oil. That is definitely leverage in kind of future negotiations. So I think the other thing that we're worth pointing out is whether it is having continued influence over the Syrian oil fields or this raid, the U.S. doesn't need to have a big military footprint on the ground in Syria to be able to continue to influence the actors in Syria, or to be able to do really key counterterrorism operations. And I think that's kind of a lesson that we learned over the weekend as well.
And with respect to the oil, Robert O'Brien, again on Meet the Press, addressed that as well, suggesting that some deal would have to be worked out. And the thought is that, at least as part of that deal, some of the wealth associated with that oil would be reserved for the Kurds.
Well, that would obviously be key to the Kurds. I think, again, another thing that was kind of not well explained over the weekend is this was kind of portrayed as kind of ethnic cleansing, and the Kurds are being pushed into the sea or something, which, again, is not true. The large Kurdish area is kind of still there. Turkey took a strip that's about 32 miles wide along the border. And so the Kurds are still a viable group in Syria, and if they have access to oil revenue, that would really strengthen them. So I think between holding out the promise that the Kurds have potential source of revenue, and the fact that they still hold most of their territory, and the fact that the U.S. negotiated a ceasefire between Turkey and the Kurds, and the fact that U.S. and the Kurds, who also helped in this operation, are continuing to do counterterrorism operation, again suggests that what we're doing in Syria is somewhere between abandoning it, which was kind of the narrative and criticism over the last couple of weeks, and trying to remake the nation, because we're not going to end the civil war. We can't do that. But what the U.S. appears to be, just analyzing the policy the last few weeks, is they're holding on to key levers that really enable the United States to continue to look after things which are of vital interest to us. And again, it's actually in some ways arguably going to be more sustainable for the Kurds, not just the fact that they're not at war with the Turks, but again, if they have the oil revenue and if their area is secure and they have a deal with the Turks, that actually gives them leverage in any kind of future political settlement. If it does get to that at some point Assad and the Russians and everybody want to come to the table and negotiate some kind of power sharing deal.
Mark Stein writing on this topic, interesting take, and of course a bit of acerbic as well, but just on the substance of it, he suggests that when Trump took office, many people thought it just would mean a restoration of a Bush-style war on terror, but Trump grasped a simple truth that evades even some of his Republican allies, especially, and of course his Republican critics. There are no takers for ineffectual warmongering. show warmongering, show of force warmongering. And he then comments specifically on what Trump has done to ISIS in the last 2.5 years. Stein writes, when he took the oath of office, the Islamic State was a nascent Saudi Arabia, blood-soaked and oil-rich, and merely awaiting diplomatic recognition. Okay, Stein. Month by month, he shrunk it and reduced it from a caliphate back to a terrorist group, but without committing vast numbers of American infantrymen. Low-key shock and awe. That culminated this weekend with the raid on al-Baghdadi. Is that a fair assessment of what he inherited and what he's methodically done over 2.5 years?
I think so, and it's also worth pointing out that they often talk about, well, Trump wants to pull out of Afghanistan, but the president is committed to retaining a footprint in Afghanistan, and it's relatively modest, probably less than 10,000 soldiers, but I think it's proven to be a level that's sustainable and a level that allows us to continue to conduct counterterrorism operations in South Asia. I often point out the difference between Syria and Afghanistan is that in the Middle East, we have a footprint where we can get at people, and I think that if nothing else, the raid this weekend demonstrated that. And really conduct operations. We can conduct counterterrorism operations essentially from northwest Syria all the way to Somalia if we need to go after high value targets and work with people on the ground. In South Asia, Afghanistan is the same thing. If we're not in Afghanistan, we're not in the game in South Asia in terms of counterterrorism operations. That's why I think that keeping the footprint there is different from the footprint in Syria.
Do you care about the coverage of this from the press corps? I mean, you have to care, obviously, what presidents and administration personnel say. So when President Obama called ISIS the JV team, that matters because it's an indication of what kind of threat assessment he is working under. But the Washington Post in particular is getting a lot of heat. Chuck Todd is getting a lot of heat for me for sort of forcing this through a domestic political prism and also soft peddling who Baghdadi was in the case of Washington Post.
No, I mean, I don't think so. I mean, the reality is Americans, by and large, trust their president to take care of foreign policy. Their lives don't turn on events like this. The people that love him, they're going to support him. The people that hate him, he could take the devil out of hell. They wouldn't vote for him. Mm-hmm. The people in the middle, by and large, we're going to Walmart. We're looking at our IRA account. We're looking at the paycheck this month. But we're really that's what we're processing about whether we want to support our president or not. So, and the other thing is look. November is so far away for most voters. This will be ancient history by the time that rolls around.
He is Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, Vice President of the Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Jim, thanks as always for joining us.